Thank you, General, for appearing to testify one last time. I know it breaks your heart that this will be your last time to testify. Most importantly, thank you for your many years of service, and thanks to your whole team for their service as well. We've heard a lot about what might happen in the future against the Islamic State in Syria and Iraq, but I don't think we've heard yet just a simple answer about how the fight's going. So could you tell us how the fight is going against the Islamic State right now?
In Syria, as you know, we are focused on completing the liberation of the physical caliphate. That is
where in Syria are you doing that right now?
In the southern Euphrates Valley, up against the border with Iraq right now. That fight is progressing as we envisioned it. As I mentioned in my opening comments, it is limited to a relatively small area. It's very dense. It's dense urban terrain, and certainly there is a lot of pressure on ISIS in there. The area is laden with extreme explosive hazards that pose significant threats to our partners on the ground, so they're having to proceed very closely. And I would add, Senator, that there is a civilian component to this. There are families of fighters. There are civilians left in the town. There are refugees that are attempting to depart this area. So what we have seen as we've kind of closed into this last area here is our Syrian Democratic Force partners with coalition assistance moving very deliberately, fully recognizing the situation on the ground and making sure they don't exacerbate this any more than it is. But we remain confident that we will finish this aspect of it. When we get done with this, well, we should expect that there will be, we will do, you know, what you would remember as back clearance, going back and re-clearing areas, removing explosive hazards, instituting local security, and then continuing to keep pressure on the remnants of the network that have gone to ground and are operating in a much more insurgent aspect. In Iraq, that is the case. We do see ISIS operating in a guerrilla or an insurgent fashion. They are at a level where, for the most part, the Iraqi security forces, with the assistance of the coalition, are able to address those threats. That will be important to continue to do that in the future. So in Iraq and Syria, that's where we are with the current fight right now, Senator.
In Syria, I've heard it said that we've taken back about 99% of what was once the territorial caliphate. Is that number correct?
That's right. We're down to about 20 square miles that they still control.
I've also heard estimates of about 20 to 30,000 Islamic State fighters remain. Do they remain in that 1% of territory, or is that only a fraction of them?
No, those fighters are geographically dispersed across Syria, across the open areas of.
So some are dug in the defensive in that 1%. Others, as you say, are spread out conducting insurgency or guerrilla type attacks.
There's probably 1,000 to 1,500 fighters that are left down in this small area right now that we're fighting over, but the remainder have dispersed and are disaggregated in a variety of different areas, and for the most part have gone to ground.
And in Iraq and very soon we hope throughout Syria as well, as you talked about countering that insurgency or those guerrilla tactics, the back clearance. Could you give the American people a little bit of sense of what our troops in Iraq are doing, or is it more like, you know, the Rangers that you once led, kicking down the doors and shooting bad guys, or are we providing them intelligence, logistic, aerial support?
The technique that we have used in both Iraq and Syria is what we refer to as by, with, and through. And we have relied on our partners, the Iraqi security forces and the Syrian Democratic Forces, to do the fighting. And our job has been to enable them with our fires, with our ISR, with our advice. Sometimes we do employ our fires in support of them and directly engage the enemy, but our people are not actually, as you suggest, kicking indoors in this case. And by, with, and through puts the emphasis on our partners to do this, and then we enable them with our capabilities to do this. And this has been, I think, a very effective approach over the last several years. And I think in the end, our partners own what is left behind. We don't. They own it. They own the security. They own the responsibility for this. This has been a different approach for us, but it is one that I think has worked very well for us.
Thank you. One final question about the implications for the future. Syrian Democratic Forces currently are detaining several hundred ISIS fighters. Is that correct?
That is correct.
We won't get any more details in the open setting here about the exact numbers or locations, but is it safe to assume that some of those are what ISIS leaders would call just cannon fodder, troops to be thrown into the maw, but some are like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, terrorist masterminds, or Ibrahim al-Asiri, master bomb makers who pose a serious threat to the United States?
I think that's accurate, Senator. They come from all aspects of ISIS.
So what's going to happen to those detainees, especially those extremely dangerous detainees in the future if the United States is not present
Well,
in
Senator,
Syria?
for those that we kind of characterize as foreign terrorist fighters, our focus needs to be on returning them to the countries of origin, and that is the work of our partners in the Department of State, Department of Justice, and others who are working with their counterparts in these countries of origins to make sure they have the evidence, the details, and we can make arrangements. Our responsibility at this time is make sure that the Syrian Democratic Forces continue to treat detainees in accordance with our values, with the law of armed conflict, and then to facilitate the movement of these fighters back to their countries.
Thank you, General. I hope we can do that with most of them. I will observe there's a lot of empty bed space at Guantanamo Bay.